Before you listen, if you enjoy the stories and want to hear more, then please consider subscribing. Most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please take this time to subscribe. Turn on notifications so you'll never miss a story and be the first to hear. You'll also be supporting me. Thank you. The night we narrowly escaped a crazy old man with a craze for violence on Halloween night will haunt me eternally. What started as playful trick-or-treating twisted into a fight for our lives when we foolishly awakened a monster. No matter how many years pass, I'll never forget the way our delighted screams morphed into blood-curdling cries of terror. Earlier that evening, my friends and I buzzed with eager excitement as we pulled on our costumes, preparing to unleash our alter egos into the night. My best friend Kay transformed into a glamorous zombie bride, carefully painting her pale face with drooping black eyeliner and dark purple lips. Her faded wedding dress was artfully shredded to reveal blood-spattered bandages underneath. Max went as a swashbuckling pirate captain, complete with a stuffed parrot on his shoulder, a sword at his hip, and a hat with a huge feather plume. Laura decided to masquerade as an elegant witch, donning a long black gown and pointed hat, with a wave of wild green hair. As for me, I became a stealthy black cat, covered head to toe in black leggings and long-sleeve shirts. I drew on whiskers, a nose, and cheek stripes with liquid eyeliner and finished it off with some fuzzy cat ears. Finally ready, we grabbed our empty pumpkin-shaped candy buckets and headed out into the crisp Halloween night. A full moon hovered above, illuminating the streets lined with glowing jack-o'-lanterns. We strode from house to house, showing off our costumes and yelling "trick or treat" at each door. Neighbors gushed over our creative looks as they filled our outstretched bags with delicious treats. We sauntered down the sidewalks, munching on candy bars and ranking our favorites so far. After a few blocks, our buckets grew heavy, but our appetite for sugar was far from satisfied. We decided to wander over to the sprawling old Victorian homes across town, having heard they gave out the extra special full-size candy bars. The walk was nearly 20 minutes, but visions of giant Snickers, king-size Reese's peanut butter cups, and brick-sized Hershey's chocolate bars fueled our journey. When we arrived at the opulent neighborhood, most trick-or-treaters had already come and gone, but a few elaborate mansions still had their lights glowing invitingly, so we trekked up the long winding driveways to ring those remaining doorbells. At the first couple houses, no one answered for a long time, forcing us to ring the bells over and over impatiently. But we were on a mission that could not be deterred. Eventually, we came upon a looming Victorian manor, decaying and dark without a single Halloween decoration in sight. The wraparound porch sagged with broken railings and missing planks. Craggy bare trees bent around the peeling walls, their twisted branches tangling over the roof and windows. Shadows seemed gathered, clustered unnaturally thick over the abandoned property. I didn't expect anyone to answer, but my friend's triple dog dared me to ring the bell. Holding my breath, I reached out and pressed the dusty glowing button. Initially, nothing happened, and I started to turn back to my friends in relief. But suddenly, ferocious barking erupted within the house, followed by indistinct, angry yelling drawing nearer. We all froze at the base of the rickety steps as the front door was wrenched open violently. A disheveled elderly man emerged, brandishing an enormous shotgun, gray hair wild around his wrinkled crimson face. In a gravelly voice, he began screaming about us pesky kids waking him up, keeping him from his beauty sleep. We all stumbled backwards, clinging to each other in shock at the sight of the formidable weapon being waved around by this enraged stranger. He continued bellowing that if we didn't march back down his driveway that very instant, he'd start shooting and wouldn't stop until we were all dead. We raised our shaking hands and pleaded with him to just calm down. We didn't mean to bother him. We were only looking for some Halloween candy. But our desperate cries fell upon deaf ears. Behind the old man, two massive Rottweilers strained against their chains tied to the porch, snapping and snarling, desperate to attack. We continued retreating slowly down the driveway with hands raised in surrender, promising again and again we'd leave immediately if he'd only lower the firearm pointed directly at our pounding hearts. But the infuriated elderly man followed us, continuing to rant at the top of his lungs that he'd teach us a lesson we wouldn't forget about trespassing on his property and disturbing his peace. As he directed the barrel of the shotgun straight toward our unprotected chests, we could restrain our terror no more. We let out unified blood-curdling shrieks of moral danger and sprinted blindly into the night, our costumes billowing behind us. The man fired a deafening shot into the dark sky, which accelerated our desperate escape. We ran until our legs burned, our lungs begged for air, and we were certain that deranged shotgun wielder was not giving chase. My heart thundered so violently I thought it might burst straight out of my chest. I couldn't stop envisioning our broken, lifeless bodies slumped on the cold pavement if his shotgun had been pointed just slightly lower. After narrowly avoiding death at the hands of the murderous old man's rampage, we had no desire to remain in that neighborhood another moment. We had learned our lesson about recklessly roaming wherever we wished on Halloween night. Never did I dream our lust for chocolate could place us directly in the murderous sights of a shotgun-toting psycho. We were the lucky ones escaping by the skin of our teeth, but others might not be so fortunate. I'll never forget the sheer terror I felt on Halloween night when a pack of threatening older teens attempted to force their way into my home after I unwittingly gave them candy. Looking back now, I realize how foolishly silly I was to assume they were just exceptionally tall children enjoying the holiday festivities. But in the cheerful spirit of Halloween, I didn't hesitate to open my door and offer treats to the costumed figures looming outside. That split-second decision almost proved fatal once they started aggressively demanding entry across my threshold. I learned the hard way that deadly danger can hide beneath innocent disguises on October 31st. Earlier that evening, I had delightedly spent hours getting my house ready to welcome the little trick-or-treaters. I carefully arranged strands of orange string lights along the railing of my front porch steps. I positioned various sized jack-o'-lanterns, their grinning faces glowing eerily in the falling dusk. Fake cobwebs blanketed the bushes framing my front door. I had even rigged a motion-activated cackling witch near the entrance to spook the kids. Inside, I filled an enormous carved wooden bowl to the brim with fun-sized candy bars to hand out. Seeing the parade of costumed children walking down the street clutching their treat bags filled me with nostalgia. I adored seeing their creativity and enthusiasm for Halloween. Princess dresses, superhero capes, skeleton makeup. It reminded me of how much I too loved going door to door for candy as a youngster. Back then, Halloween felt like pure magic. My rose-colored glasses were still on that night as I swung open my door over and over to excitedly hand out treats. If only I had known then what sinister intruders lurked in the darkness ahead. My naivety almost proved lethal once I opened my door to those figures and ignored the blazing warning signs. That night my eyes were forced open to the fact that not everyone sharing in Halloween festivities has good intentions at heart. As Halloween night wore on, the excited groups of little kids eventually dwindled. I figured I had seen the last round of costume-clad trick-or-treaters for the year, but close to 10 p.m., the doorbell rang unexpectedly. I opened it expecting to see more children, but instead found several towering figures in hoodies lurking there, their faces obscured in shadow. They held up plastic pumpkins mutely, so I dropped candy inside, complimenting their costumes even though they wore none. The moment I began closing the heavy wooden door, one of them swiftly stuck their foot out to block it. My heart began violently hammering against my chest instantly. In gruff voices, they told me they wanted to come inside to hang out for a while. I was completely blindsided by these shady strangers inviting themselves in. I awkwardly laughed and stated no, they really had to get going. But they didn't budge and asked again, far more aggressively, to come inside and relax a bit. At that point, I was utterly panicked but tried remaining calm. I firmly told them they needed to leave immediately or I'd be forced to call the police. But instead of backing away, they suddenly pushed forward in unison, trying to muscle the door open wider. Pure adrenaline pumped through my veins as I shoved back with all my might, screaming at them repeatedly to get away from my house. We struggled savagely against the entrance as I continued desperately yelling for them to leave. They were shouting and cursing at me to let them in, becoming more enraged and violent with each attempt. One of them smashed their shoulder into the door, making me stumble backward. I felt a lock start to give way as two more threw their weight against it. Digging my heels in, I pushed back with every ounce of strength I had, my arms shaking from the exertion. We remained deadlocked, neither side willing to yield. I could see their hands grasping at the widening crack, trying to work their fingers in to wrench it open wider. Screaming at the top of my lungs for help, I gave one last monumental shove. The unexpected force sent them off balance just long enough for me to slam the door shut. My hands scrambled to lock the deadbolt as their fists pounded angrily against the wood, yelling threats if I didn't let them in. Adrenaline still surging, I yelled through the door I was calling the police if they didn't leave right that instant. Just when I felt my strength failing against their unrelenting force, a neighbor's voice rang out from the darkness, asking if I required assistance. The figures froze briefly at the sound before swearing under their breath and sprinting off into the night. I glimpsed their retreating forms disappearing into the shadows, still consumed by aggression and menace. My elderly neighbor, Mr. Jensen, came rushing over as I collapsed in overwhelming relief that he had intervened before they could gain access to my home. I was badly shaken to the core after nearly being forced inside by those threatening strangers. It made me realize you simply cannot assume all people out on Halloween night have innocent intentions. I'll never know if they planned to just rob me, or had something far more sinister in mind had they succeeded in entering. The whole traumatic event left me plagued with anxiety and unable to feel safe in my own home for quite some time afterwards. I had trouble sleeping, jolting awake at the slightest sounds. I found myself obsessively checking and rechecking door locks during the day. I kept reliving those awful moments, struggling at the entrance, their enraged faces pulling at the opening. Mr. Jensen tried calming me down, assuring me those punks wouldn't be coming back after the scare he gave them. But I knew the false illusion of safety had been shattered for me that Halloween. Now when October 31st rolls around each year, I take careful precautions to avoid ever being that vulnerable again. I only crack the door an inch when giving out candy, keeping the chain lock secured. I make sure to only dole out treats early in the evening when it's likely to just be innocent kids around. And I've installed a high-tech security system with motion sensor lights and cameras covering every possible approach to the house. If any questionable groups even look at my property, I'll see them coming and be prepared. So, it's a pitch-black Halloween night. Okay, maybe not pitch black, but it was certainly darker than my chances of winning the costume contest. Dressed up as the most epic werewolf the neighborhood has ever seen. If I do say so myself, I'm ready to conquer the Candy Kingdom. Little did I know this Halloween would become the stuff of legends. So let's set the stage. It's Halloween night, and the air is so thick with the scent of fake fog and pumpkin spice that you practically taste it. The streets are alive with kids of all sizes and shapes, parading around like they're on a candy-fueled mission. The excitement is so tangible you could cut it with a plastic pumpkin-shaped knife. But oh, cue the ominous music, because the festive atmosphere takes an unexpected chilling turn. In the midst of this Halloween carnival, who do I spot but Tom, the school bully extraordinaire leading his gang of mischievous minions. It's like the Wicked Witch of the West just sauntered into Oz, and suddenly, the whole vibe of the night goes from festive to spine-tingling. Picture it. Tom, with his trademark sneer, strutting down the sidewalk like he's the king of Halloween. His gang of troublemakers trails behind him like obedient minions ready to cause chaos. The moment you catch a glimpse of those unmistakable figures, it's like a record scratch in the Halloween soundtrack. The anticipation shifts from joyous to uneasy, and you can feel a collective shiver run down the spine of every trick-or-treater in the vicinity. Now, Tom's not just your run-of-the-mill bully. No, he's got an uncanny talent for turning those joyful occasions into a nightmare. His gang, a motley crew of trouble, adds an extra layer of spookiness to the scene. It's like a Halloween horror movie, and we're all unwitting extras in Tom's twisted production. As Tom and his gang weave through the crowd, the atmosphere becomes charged with a mix of fear and anticipation. It's not just the eerie decorations and spooky costumes anymore. It's the looming presence of trouble that adds a real chill to the air. The plastic skeletons hanging from the trees suddenly seem less amusing and more foreboding, as if they're warning of the impending mayhem. Alright, so here I am, Halloween night, running like my tail's on fire from Tom and his gang. These guys are like the ghosts of Halloween past, haunting me with their relentless pursuit. I'm zigzagging through the streets, feeling like a squirrel at caffeine binge, thanks to all the candy, not actual caffeine. Tom's laughter is the soundtrack to my panic. Where do I go? That's the million-dollar question. My werewolf instincts kick in, and I spot this house with porch lights that are practically yelling, "Safe haven." I dash up the steps like my candy stash is on the line and pound at the door like my life depends on it. The door creaks open and boom, there's Granny Halloween Hero, the unsung savior of the night. I pull the oldest trick in the book, mutter something about a neighborhood costume contest, and beg for refuge. And you know what? Granny, with a heart bigger than her cauldron of candy, invites me in. I find myself in her living room, which is like a Halloween museum. Cobwebs, creepy dolls, and spooky vibes. This place is the real deal. I'm catching my breath while Tom's taunts turn into distant echoes. Granny, the legend she is, gives me a pep talk that's like a shot of courage straight to my werewolf soul. As if that's not enough, she hands me a handful of extra candies for the road. But these aren't your average candies. They're like magical tokens of protection against whatever other spooks are lurking out there. Feeling like I've been granted a Halloween knighthood by Granny Halloween Hero, I step back into the night. Tom and his gang are now distant shadows, and armed with Granny's wisdom and those extra candies, I'm on a mission to conquer the rest of the candy cosmos. Granny, you're the real MVP of Halloween, turning a spooky chase into a legendary tale of werewolf resilience. But hold your broomsticks, because the plot thickens. As I navigate the dimly lit streets, I stumble upon a house that practically screams eerie. It's the kind of haunted mansion you see in horror movies, with flickering candles and ominous shadows. Against my better judgment, or lack thereof, I decide to knock. The door creaks open, revealing an interior that's straight out of a nightmare. As I explore, the floorboards creak beneath me and creepy whispers slither through the air. Halloween decorations take on a life of their own, and I can't shake the feeling that I've walked into a real-life horror flick. Goosebumps, more like a whole flock of geese taking residence on my arms. Just when I'm ready to call it a night, a hooded figure emerges from the shadows. Cue panic, right? But no, it turns out to be another Halloween enthusiast orchestrating a haunted house experience. We share a laugh at my near heart attack and head back to the front door, where the real world awaits. As I step back into the Halloween night, my candy bag a bit heavier and my nerves slightly frazzled, I reflect on the wild ride this night has thrown my way. From dodging bullies to finding refuge in Granny Halloween Hero's living room, and stumbling into a legit haunted house, it's a Halloween for the storybooks. So, as I stroll home through the echoes of laughter and the rustle of autumn leaves, I can't help but think, now that's what Halloween is all about, embracing the unexpected and relishing the thrill of the unknown. And so, my friends, ends the Halloween night that had more twists and turns than a haunted house roller coaster. Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.